Welcome back for the last lesson in the Communicate module, and that is pragmatic language. So this is another word for social language. So first we had to understand language, then we had to express language, now we have to use it socially in various different situations. There is so much to learn that we take for granted, and it is really important to take a step back and think about all the different social skills you use every day and don't even realize it. There's eye contact, there's gestures, there's facial expressions, there's code switching. So, based on how you talk to a baby is very different than how you talk to a child, it's very different than how you talk to an adult. So, there's so many layers to pragmatic language that your child likely has trouble with one or more of these areas. And you can be their biggest cheerleader and biggest supporter by understanding some of the challenges and helping them get through it. In that same regard, you might also need to switch some of the ways you've been thinking or you've been taught to manage the needs of your child. So, what am I talking about? Think about how your child right now uses words, and if we're not using words yet, uses pictures or gestures or vocalizations in social contexts. So this is nonverbal cues. So does your child understand if somebody rolls their eyes and goes like that has a meaning? Does your child understand that if I go, I might be sad? Figurative language. Right now it is raining cats and dogs out. Can your child understand that means it's raining really hard out? Maintaining topics, initiating and ending conversations, understanding the unspoken rules. For example, do you walk up and hug everybody you meet? Not usually, but for some kids, that's how they want to greet people. And we need to help the environment that they're in understand that that's their communication pattern, and that's probably okay. Most people like hugs, but some people don't. Some people will be like, stop. So we need to help teach that child that that's not appropriate for that person. There's also taking turns. Can your child share? It's usually a really hard one, even for neurotypical children. It is hard to share and to understand that if I give you something, I'm going to get it back. There's the issue of trust again. And then also predicting consequences for one's behavior. So if I hit Johnny, I'm going to get a timeout or I'm going to get in trouble. Can a kid predict that? Probably not. Johnny just took their block and they're mad, so they whack him. They're not even thinking about in the future what's going to happen because their brain hasn't developed that process yet. So it's a lot to unpack, and I definitely can't unpack everything in this presentation, but I will say that autistic individuals in the communities that I follow have talked a lot about eye contact, and eye contact is not comfortable for them. So before, we used to write goals for eye contact, or the child will sustain attention for so long. And those are things we really need to look at as potentially being harmful and traumatizing to children. If you've ever had a conversation with someone and stare directly into their eyes, it's a little uncomfortable. And kids can't pick up on when I can look away and when I can look back. It's just something we do normally that we take for granted. Just because a child isn't looking at me doesn't mean they're not attending to me. It might be really intense for them because they might look at my face and stare at a new makeup. That's a bad example for you, but my hair being different, or if I have an earring on that day, and they might not be able to sustain attention to my eyes because it's uncomfortable for them. So a lot of times you can work around this by maybe having your child, if instead of saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, you can say, I need your attention, and they can just shift their body towards you. So you know that they're attending to you. They don't need to necessarily look at you to be able to understand what you're about to say. So that is an area I would definitely look at if you have an IEP for eye contact or other things that really force children into doing things. There's a lot of research and a lot of people are coming out now saying that is really not the right way to do it anymore. With that, Maintaining topics and initiating and ending conversations is often very difficult for autistic individuals because they don't necessarily love the small talk. What's the point of me saying, hey, how are you today? Do I really want to know if we're walking by each other in a hall that you're having a horrible morning, you got a flat tire, your kids are sick, you were late for work, the boss is yelling at you, if we were just quickly walking by each other? No. And usually that person will just say, I'm okay. And that's it. But what's the point of that conversation? You're going to get everything that happened to that person if you ask them that question, probably because they're going to tell you. You ask them a question. They are very concrete thinkers. And a lot of what we do with social language is more abstract. So now that you know some of the ways it might be difficult, what are some of the ways you can help them connect socially? Topics of interest or passions. So these are things that we used to say kids perseverated on and couldn't get past, but now a really better way of looking at it is what is their interest? What is their passion? I worked with a student who was obsessed or had a passion about Marvel and the Marvel video game. And he would watch it on YouTube. He would play it on the weekends. That is all he wanted to talk about. So if I want to make a connection with him, I'm going to learn some things about it. Granted, I already know a lot because I do love Marvel myself, but I'm going to try to connect with him by doing that. Am I going to make him talk all the time about Harry Potter, which I love? No, because that's not interesting to him. So what does he care what happened to Dumbledore and Harry? He doesn't. He wants to talk about his passions and things that are interesting to him. Now, if I can eventually bridge a gateway to, hey, superheroes have powers, and guess what? So do wizards, kind of. That might be a way for us to kind of meet in the middle and talk about powers and what wizards can do and what superheroes can do. And that might be a really good way to take something that I love and something that he loves and meet in the middle. But I'm not going to sit there and make him read all the Harry Potter books with me because that is not something he wants to do. That's not going to help your connection. Now, with that, you want to think about maybe connecting him with other people. There are other kids in my school that also love superheroes and are autistic. So we made a Marvel club where they could go and talk for hours about the villains and things that to me would go over my head, but to them, they knew everything. They knew all the things that they put at the end of the movies. I forget what they're called right now. But they could talk about it for hours. And that was genuine connection for them. So instead of trying to pigeonhole your kid to have to talk about certain things that these kids in the neighborhood love or something that you or your significant other loves, try taking something that they love and then expanding on it. The other issue is they often have trouble with empathy. So this is thinking about others. So if my friend called me and said, oh, Maggie, my dog just passed away, my reaction would immediately be gutted. I would say, I am so sorry. That is so awful because I've been there, first of all. And I immediately don't want my friend to be hurting. I know what she's going through. It's so hard. I feel awful about it. Now, before I had a dog and knew what that was like, I might be like, oh, sorry for the loss of your pet. You know, I know death is hard, but not really get it. But because I'd had that experience and I love dogs, that would really resonate with me. When I told some of my students when my dog unfortunately did pass away earlier, they were like, get a new one. Black and white. This one's gone, get a new one. That's how they saw it. They didn't have that ability to have that empathy towards me in that situation. Am I saying they're not empathetic at all? No, absolutely not. But it's often a little more of a struggle because of a brain difference. The area in their brain that has that emotional response might not be lighting up as much as it does for me or somebody else. So it's really sometimes hard when they're like, oh, I stole this from a kid. And we're like, how would that make you feel? And they would be like, I'd get it back. That's just what they would do. They need to have it really spelled out for them that made somebody sad. A lot of times we use these emotions, sad, mad, happy, but do they understand that? Do they understand what being sad means? We need to teach it first. So maybe the next time they unfortunately get hurt or the internet goes out so they can't watch Blippi and they're crying, you can make, you're really sad right now. I see how sad you are. Label that emotion in lots of different contexts. If you're watching a TV show and something happens to a character, oh my God, they are so happy right now. Look how happy they are. The more you can label it, the more that your child will then be able to use it in different contexts. Now, the double empathy issue is what we have as a society, that we're not always super empathetic towards autistic individuals. So if you have a neurotypical child and you have an autistic child together and they're trying to have a conversation, the neurodiverse child might be like, why is this person trying to get me to play soccer? And the neurotypical child is like, what's wrong with this guy? Why won't he play sports? All he does is talk about Marvel. They can't understand each other. As adults, our frontal lobes are developed. So we have lots more critical thinking skills. We have lots more connections. Children need to be taught them. So it's great to see that a lot of inclusion programs out there. And I worked in a preschool, an integrated preschool. And so my children were exposed very early on to neurodiverse individuals. So now that's just, oh, that's just this person. That's just, it's not a big deal. It's just a difference. It's just how they think. But for some people, it's still really hard to understand and appreciate how hard it might be. Like if you went back and you said, hey, so-and-so has a really hard time playing sports, but he really likes Marvel. Maybe you could talk to him about some superheroes and then what would happen if you could fly when you could play soccer. And then make that connection for them, because both of the children don't have fully developed brains yet. So we have to really try to work not only with our children, but with the children around us to help make the connections and understand that something might be really difficult for them. So using loud noises, for example, and if your child is wearing headphones, it's really good to educate if other kids are around. Hey, Johnny really just doesn't like loud noises, so we're just going to wear headphones. Do any of you not like loud noises? Maybe you want headphones, because it doesn't have to be something that you have to have a quote unquote disability to get accommodations. It shouldn't be like that. If I don't like loud noises, I should get to put in my earbuds when I'm walking down a busy street, because that will help me focus on music that I like instead of the cars and the chaos and the busyness. That might help relax me. It doesn't mean I necessarily am a neurodiverse individual. I've just learned that about myself. So our children have not learned ways to help themselves yet. We have to learn ways for them to help themselves and also to fit in society. But the bigger issue is to help society accept and honor and love them for who they are and all the wonderful things they can bring to this world. Because evolution's going on and there's a lot of theories about human evolution. But let's be honest, I do not have the attention to sit and program video games. But a lot of kids out there could do that. They could sit there for hours and do coding and do all these things that my brain cannot do, because they have that intense focus. So instead of thinking always of it as, oh, my kid doesn't want to go out and socialize all the time, what do they do really well? They can still be really successful, but success, we need to start thinking of success differently than what quote unquote is typical to go out there. I know every mom wants, and dad out there, guardian or whatever, wants their children to have friends and find supportive people and loved ones, but we have to be open to looking for it. And if it's not there, we develop it. We get kids who have similar interests and bring them into social situations and explain to them, hey, Johnny might flap his arms when he gets really excited. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. And the more we can make it so that is accepted in our society, the better the world is going to be. I really, really believe that. So going along with that, I will say that in the last module, I forgot to say, don't say. So I just want to throw that in here. A lot of times when we're working on expressive language, we'll get a cup and we'll say cup, 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 say cup. What does the child do? They say cup, both words. And it's really hard to drop that word. So whenever you're modeling, make sure you're just modeling cup. Here's a cup, not necessarily saying say cup, say cup. So that's just a little reminder because I forgot to say that in the last episode, or the last lesson, not episode. And the last thing about social language is there is an amazing technique called social stories. So if you've been around for a while, you might have heard of them. And what it is talking in a positive note about social situations. So if we have a kid at school who is really having trouble sharing, we might write a social story that says, when I come to school, I can share. It makes my friends feel good when I share. I feel good when I share. I love sharing with my friends to see them smile and put pictures on it of all these kids that are happy, or have real life pictures of the student sharing and a peer smiling or something like that. And this is a great way to highlight the positive, what you want them to do. So if you don't want them to do something, we always run to don't do that. Don't hit Johnny. Don't do this. When really we want to highlight the positive. So this is great for social situations. So when I go out, I can say hi to my friends. I can get their attention. I can talk about these things. It's a good way of writing a story and giving your child examples of things that they can do. That way, when they're in that situation, they might be more successful. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, about behaviors, but I wanted to throw that in there just to give you a little taste of it for now. But that is going to wrap up the communication portion of this module, and I will see you next in my favorite module, play. Bye for now.